So I'd like to start this afternoon by talking about a woman, Benu. For those who don't know, her first job in hospitality was actually in a Sheraton hotel in India. She came over to the US, and she couldn't get a job in a respectable hotel because nobody could understand her. She worked in a motel, and when she went into that motel, it was running 10% occupancy and was run down. It took her less than a year to get the occupancy up to 95%, and then she was poached by another small group who had 5 hotels. And she ran the sales and marketing for that, and then she talked her way into being the general manager of that. And then just before Al Gore, she heard about the internet. And she took over. Now, she has helped me personally, for somebody at my age, trying to figure out what was going on. It was difficult. She took a lot of her personal time to educate me, to argue with me, to discuss with me, and truly to take Hyatt into different levels than we'd ever would have got to. And on behalf of us all in the room, Benu, I have a little thing for you here of thanks from everybody in the hotel industry for what you have done. We are all better companies because of her. So I'm delighted to say that we're not going to talk about distribution. We're not going to talk about social. We're not going to talk about web design. I actually want to share with you some thoughts about leadership and thoughts about where we should think about leadership and how we should potentially start changing our behaviors to meet today's modern demands. And I'm going to go through 4 different areas. Talk about why do we have to change? Then the purpose as a business strategy, the power of empathy and how, in many respects, we've all lost it. And lastly, how you could take purpose yourselves after the meeting. We heard this morning, change is all around us. And when I was listening, you guys deal with more change than anybody. If you're having to keep track with Google, that means you're at the forefront of every single thing that's going on. But there's other things which are going on too. If you think about Uber, Uber's what, 8 years old? They're now the largest taxi company in the world, and they don't own a taxi. Let me ask you, how many of you know that the drivers are scoring you every time you are in there? How many of you know what your score is? How many of you are nicer with the driver just to make sure that your score is high? Why has the hotel industry not figured out yet how to score our customers? Because if I know when I'm in an Uber cab, I am nicer because I do want that higher score because I know they won't come and pick me up if I'm at 3.2. Second of all, think about Amazon. Anybody buying anything from Amazon in the room? How many of you are Amazon Prime? Wow. How many of you bought something recently, but before you bought it, you looked at a review? All of you. So that means how many people are buying our hotels without looking at a review? Look at our behavior. Look at the way we do our buying, and look at the way we as our consumers. So that means that here we are. Amazon's now the world's largest retailer. They don't own a store, but they totally own their customer. Netflix. We all got something on Netflix? They're basically today the world's largest cinema provider, and they don't own a cinema. It's going to be very interesting to watch how they innovate, because I think Apple TV and Amazon are seeing a huge opportunity to slice into their business. And lastly, let's talk about Airbnb. Bill spoke about them a bit this morning. How many of you have stayed in an Airbnb? I'm going to ask you if I could ask you to, I'm just bringing a mic down to you. Look out. Can you describe to me your experience with Airbnb?
It was great. We actually stayed at Airbnb 2 nights before taking a cruise in the Mediterranean, and we were in Venice. and we searched it. We found a place that had character and was historical, and had very good ratings, and booked it without
Did
any.
you establish a relationship with your host?
Yes,
What was that relationship like?
it was very authentic. It will
Yeah.
be the place. The family of the young couple had been in Venice for like 5 generations. The house had been in the family for a long time, and they had come over after being in some other parts of the world, renovated the house, and then had 2 rooms that they had in part of it that were Airbnb. It was very cool.
So I promise you we didn't know each other, and this wasn't a setup. But think about the secret sauce of Airbnb, the relationship they establish prior to arrival, the one-to-one experience between you and the host. I guarantee you that Bill's kids will never stay in a hotel because we can't provide that yet. And if we want to truly compete with Airbnb, and by the way, I think they will kill us, we have to figure out that one-to-one relationship prior to arrival. I loved what Benna was saying this morning about the new product, but it's not person to person. It's going to be, do you know what I mean? If she can create that we can really answer questions. How many of you have never stayed in an Airbnb? Do me a huge favor. The next time you travel, go through the experience. Even go through the experience and then cancel. Because if you don't, you won't know what our competition is doing. I stay in Airbnbs. Now, the last time I was in San Francisco, stayed in an Airbnb, the host not only told me what restaurant I should go to close by his apartment, he told me the waiter I should ask for when I make my reservation. He left some skim milk in the fridge for me, and the one-to-one relationship, I felt so comfortable that I knew what I was going to happen, how it was going to go to. I think their Achilles heel. After I left, he sent me an email saying next time I come to San Francisco, I could always book direct. So obviously, they won't be able to necessarily control their distribution, but I promise you, Airbnb have changed the customer experience, and they are delivering an experience to customers that we hoteliers haven't cracked. And we have to figure out how to do it. And the first hotel company that does will gain share. No 2 ways about it.
To your point, they also rate you.
They rate you.
They rate the guest.
Yep.
And then if if your feedback is bad to the hotel is also rating you bad, it cancels each other.
The apartment, or not the hotel. Yeah, so that's another great point. And by the way, they look at your rating and how you've rated other properties. And if you've actually left a house or a room dirty and it's up on there, they just won't rent it out to you. So it's a very, very different market. There's lots of other things that are going on. Most of us today are feeling like numbers. 86% of people are telling us that they will pay more for an experience. But think about what the hotel industry's become. We have become a transaction, a simple transaction until we arrive at the hotel. And even at the hotel, I would say to you, we've, for the most part, become a commodity. 30% of consumers think brands, only 30% of consumers think brands truly care for them. And in our own industry, 49% of travelers won't book a hotel without looking at reviews. Millennials. How many in the room are millennials? I'm one. Millennials is about psychographics, not demographics. Look at me up here. I have my phone, I've got an iPad, I've got my computer. I want to know information now. I'm just like you, sir. I'm checking on my emails to make sure that I'm current. I'm looking at the news. Look what we're all doing while the conventions are on. Checking, seeing, watching. I actually want to know how I'm doing right now, just like any other millennial. So when we think about millennials, think about the way you've changed the way you live your life. Because actually, if you're not living to that style, you probably won't be in the workforce much longer. Because that's what's actually happening. Now, They stayed at independent hotels. They feel it's their responsibility to give feedback. And they're looking for brands that will really entertain them. How many of you are suffering from stress? Yes? It's common. There's been a recent study that only 30% of the workforce is actively engaged in their work. Imagine this, 89% of the workforce believe they're working for a company that does not care for them as human beings. How many of you, if you actually reflected, could honestly say, my company does not care for me as a human? All you milestone people, put your hands down, please. We got a photograph of it. We got them. 96% of leaders report they're feeling burned out, and 33% are saying they're extremely burned out. And by the way, most of our leaders are taking culture for granted. What does this mean? It means that we're going to have to change, and we're going to have to think deeply, because we cannot survive for the rest of our careers working under the stress we're doing. By the way, how many of you are working 10 hours or more a day? How many of you are working 12 hours or more a day? Why? Have a think about why and challenge yourself. We're going to talk more about it when we get onto some of the solutions. But really, are you your most effective if you are working 12 hours a day? And if you have people who are working for you, and you are working 12, 14 hours a day, what type of mentor are you? I have to tell you, in the actual hotel business, we cannot attract young people now. They will not do the hours. And part of that is because my generation, we got where we got through working 16, 18 hours a day. And then we expected others to do it. And we led the worst example. We have to change. Otherwise, we won't have anybody in the new generation coming through who want to work in the hotel industry. 60% of customers in our own lives are considering at least 2 hotels every single time they want to make a hotel. And 92% of hotel guests are not loyal. I think I heard Bill go and talk a tiny bit too much about Starwood. Luckily, they don't exist much longer, so he'll have to be... We'll be interested. Where I saw that he's somewhere on Hyatt. We were bottom of the list. By the way, I'm no longer with Hyatt, but I still have Hyatt on my heart and on my shoulders and in my body. But I hope that you, like many others, will desert Starwood and become a Hyatt loyalist once the merger finishes. But part of this is location, location, location. We still stay in the most convenient place. Very few of us will travel a mile out of our way just for points. We all know about the OTAs. We all know how they're eating into our profits. We all know how part of the compromise the hotel industry has made in marketing is that we've actually reduced our marketing spend to cover and hide the incremental revenues that we're giving to the OTAs. And in doing so, we're doing less branding. We're doing less work for ourselves. I had some data in 2014 that the online travel, the Pricelines, the Expedia, et cetera, they spent $1.3 billion marketing and advertising in 2014. The hotel industry collectively, all of the big boys and the small boys, spent $242 million. We can't compete like that. We're going to have to find other ways to compete. And if you have a look at TripAdvisor of comments, there are 3 main comments that come out: friendly, very friendly, and helpful. Those are the biggest. If you look at a word cloud of everything that's said in TripAdvisor, those are the 3 words that are predominant. And guess what? They're the same for Hyatt, Hilton, Starwood, and Marriott. But they're almost all about service. They're not about experiences. And if we can't figure out as an industry how to start thinking about experience versus service, we're going to be in trouble. Even worse, think about our stakeholders. We have owners of our hotels who have an entirely different view of what they want to achieve which is all about how can I buy a hotel, increase the profits, and flip it within 5 years. You've got the franchisees who are on short-term management franchise agreements whose only goal is to make sure I keep my owner happy so that he keeps me going. You've got the brands who are saying, guys, we've got to keep to these standards. By the way, we're going to check on you on these standards. And we've completely forgotten about customers. I'll tell you a quick story on standards. I was actually watching a check-in in one of our hotels in Hong Kong, and I saw this customer come to the hotel, and he was checking in, and all he wanted was the key to his room. And this lovely lady behind the front desk kept on asking more questions. And afterwards, I asked her, how did that go? She said it went so badly. I said, why? She said, because the customer only wanted the key to his room. I said, so why didn't you give it to him? She said, well, he might have been the mystery shopper, and if he had been the mystery shopper and I hadn't asked all these questions, my boss would have lost part of his bonus. In our case, 5 weeks later, we actually gave up mystery shopping because we realized we weren't authentic. If what we had done as an industry, because we had franchised, we started hiring wonderful young people. We then gave them a script. We said to them, leave your personality at the front back door. When you come in, do your 8-hour shift, follow these lines, and we created human robots. And that allowed people like Airbnb to come in and grab us. The other thing I actually forgot on this slide is our colleagues. I actually believe over the last few years, we've actually forgotten about the colleague experience. And if you think about it, the industry is being weighted towards owners and shareholders and profits at the expense of customer experiences and our colleagues. Some companies have gone out of business because they didn't follow trends, whether it's Nokia, BlackBerry, Newsweek. How many of you went to Blockbuster 5 years ago? Who could imagine if you were on the board of Blockbuster at a meeting 5 years ago that you would have been able to forecast you were out of business? I think the hotel industry has got just as much a threat if we don't actually wake up. So now I'm going to talk a tiny bit about some of the answers and some of the potential solutions and how we can actually start creating businesses with a purpose. How we can actually get away from service and actually start thinking about experiences. Let's talk a tiny bit about Southwest Airlines. Any of you flown Southwest? 9 times out of 10, it's a good experience. 9 times out of 10, the crew are in great shape. Southwest have a purpose, and their purpose is to connect people to what's important in their lives. To connect people in what's important in their lives through friendly, reliable, and low-cost air travel. And their vision is to become the world's most loved, most flown, and most profitable airline. Do any of you work for a company that uses the word love? In my last role at Hyatt, my title actually was the Ambassador of Love. And I actually think it's a word that we're going to use more and more and has completely different connotations today than what it had 15 years ago. I was lucky enough. I spent 2 days at Southwest Airlines, and they allowed me to see completely under the cover of what they do. Do you know that they have never laid anybody off in 42 years of flying an airline? Do you know that last year, every single member of Southwest team received a 15.6% bonus into their retirement fund as part of the company profits? The company matches 7.2% of your salary. Any of you been with your company for 5 years? What did you get? Not a lot? A 6th year. At Southwest Airlines, on your 5th anniversary, they fly you to Dallas for a massive celebration and a banquet, and you can fly with your partner. They put you up. They put you up in a hotel room for 2 nights. This year, they had 5,200 people attending. Southwest Airlines have a culture team of 30 people whose sole role is to protect their culture and to bring it to life. And that is because everything they do and everything they think about is about how do we keep our costs low and how do we keep love in the air. Do you know, I was there and I listened to two people having an argument over the thickness of a piece of paper. It wasn't anything other to do than if we'd had a slightly thinner piece of paper, that would have been more money we could have put back into our culture. Their boss for years, Herb Keller, had this saying, keep costs low and spirit high, and the people of Southwest Airlines will keep love in the air. And this is his favorite photograph of himself. They live that culture of fun. They even create that love in their logo. And if you go on the ticker tape in the stock market, their sign is LUV. They also live to that culture.
At Southwest Airlines, we're united by a purpose that is at the heart of everything we do. It's the simplest and purest expression of why we exist. Our purpose at Southwest Airlines is clear. We exist to connect people to what's important in their lives through friendly, reliable, and low-cost air travel. This purpose is why we get up every morning and why we matter to the millions of people who fly with us each year. And if we live this purpose every day, we'll achieve our vision to become the world's most loved, most flown, and most profitable airline. But it all starts with you.
We had to go to the airport for my husband to be deployed for 6 months to Kuwait. So when we got to the airport, we were sure we weren't going to be able to go past security with him. We would have to say goodbye.
I saw him walk up in uniform, and I saw a whole bunch of family members standing nearby, so I asked him if he was being deployed, and he said yes. And I asked him if they all wanted to go to the gate with him, and he said, yeah, that'd be great.
So we were very happy because that bought us about 30 more minutes for us to spend time together. But once it was time for him to go on the plane, we had our moment, we hugged, and said goodbye. The kids did really great. I was holding it together, but we wanted to stay and watch his plane take off. One of the Southwest employees came over, tapped us on the shoulder again, and said, "Can I please do something for you?" Thoughts in the back of my head were, what can you possibly do to make this any better at this point?
I realized we had about 3 to 4 extra minutes before the scheduled departure time.
He stepped away for a moment, made a quick phone call, and came back and asked if the kids and I would mind coming back on the plane. So we were very excited. The kids ran down the tunnel. When we got to the end of the tunnel, they called out on the intercom if there was a John Chatelier on the flight. And we saw my husband's hand go up in the air, and the kids were able to run to him and give him one last hug. And the amazing part was the whole plane cheered, and everybody was real excited for us. So we got one last moment with him before they closed the doors and the plane took off.
It was a touching moment, and all the passengers started clapping, and everyone was tearing up.
When I talked to him when he had landed in Kuwait, he said that that whole moment, that experience, made him realize that people were going to be watching out for us, watching out for him, and just taking care of us overall.
You know, I'm such a sentimental Englishman. I've watched that movie so many times, and it gets me every single time. And every time I see it, I think of a couple of things. I think of how many rules did they break? But it cost nothing. They broke rules to change an experience. I ask you, how many of the companies that you work for would allow you to break rules? A lot of companies talk about empowerment, but very few actually allow you to be that empowered person. Southwest Airlines, 52,000 employees. Do you know last year they employed 6,000 new employees? They interviewed 81,000 people to get to that 6,000. Because what they're looking for is people who have that spirit in them, who can deliver their purpose to connect with people during their important moments. They're looking for people who have that ability to connect one-on-one. I was also lucky enough, and in my last role at Hyatt, I was able to visit many, many different companies to really understand what made them tick. And I spent an incredible time at Wynn Casinos. I don't know how many of you have stayed at Wynn. And for me, their numbers show you, they have a 20% premium on any other strip, any of the other hotels on the strip. And I went there because I wanted to find out why. What was it about Wynn that made them so different? And Steve Wynn has one philosophy, and that is that people make people happy. Now, if you have a meeting with Steve, you have to give him a story. You have to tell him a story of a moment of care or a moment of actual one-on-one interaction that you witnessed between that then and the previous time. And he said that when I started this culture 9 years ago, for the first 2 years, my executive team didn't believe I was serious. I wanted to listen to stories. I wanted to hear what was going on in the organization. He said, you know, first couple of weeks they BS'd me. They had a bunch of stories tucked in their minds they could come up with, but then they started running dry. So what did they do? They went down to the line managers and said, tell me a story. Tell me a story about something that happened in the casino yesterday. They have 12,000 employees. And I witnessed morning stand-up of housekeeping, and they all started by telling stories. Some of those stories took place inside work, some took place outside. In fact, today, they have 2 professional writers who write up the stories, because what Steve realized is that there were lots of stories taking place, but they weren't being properly written and they were being lost. By the way, when I think of stories, because stories are so important for us all, Southwest Airlines, do you know that if you go on their website, you can actually write a story around your last visit? They get around 4,300 stories a month that consumers write. Part of that culture team, they figure out what are the best 8 stories that have been published, and those 8 people are flown into Dallas and are celebrated for the story that they gave. So if I think about what they had in common and what Steve Wynn has in common with Southwest is a deep-rooted culture around storytelling, around empowerment, about making people happy and making a difference. I've been doing some work. I don't know how many of you have seen the video by Simon Sinek on Ask the Question Why. If you haven't, I ask you to write it down and look at it afterwards. I've been doing a lot of work with his team because he believes that successful companies start with the why. Most companies start with the what. Think about Southwest Airlines. They start with their why, to give love in the air. Their how, their USP, is that they keep their costs low, and their what? They fly a lot of aircraft to a lot of different destinations. Now imagine and think through the way Southwest communicate. It is all about love. It is all about their employees. It is all about giving. And then think of the way United communicate. We fly the friendly skies. They're not so friendly. They don't have a culture team of 30 people. They don't live and breathe through their why. It's the same actually at Wynn. Everything about Wynn Casinos, and I believe the reason why they have that 20% premium in RevPAR is because they live and die through their why. People make people happy. It's interesting if you actually have a look at Caesars, their why, we inspire grown-ups to play. So what? So I was a bit naughty yesterday. I looked up Milestone's website. All they talk about is their what. We design user-friendly websites for hotels with clean layouts, vibrant digital assets, and robust architecture. I wish Milestone would actually talk about their why. And in my mind, Milestone's why is we curate dreams. We just happen to build websites. That for me, and I actually said to John earlier, wouldn't you love at a dinner party when somebody asks you, what do you do? Oh, I build websites for hotels. To be able to go and say, I curate dreams. Think of the difference. And that's why I think companies today are going to have to understand and figure out their why and ask people to live by it, to behave like it, to change their behaviors, to actually be part of why. Because those companies with why are doing so much better than those that don't. They're getting a higher return on investment, lower staff turnover. It makes strong cultures stronger, and the impact on the guest is so profound. Harvard Business Review did a study on purpose. Employees who derive meaning from their work are 2.2 more times likely to stay, 2.2 have higher job satisfaction, and are 93% more engaged. They asked those leaders that employees felt had clarity of purpose and communicated it, inspired their employees to be 70% more satisfied in their jobs, 56% more engaged, and 100% more likely to stay within the organization. But here's the kicker. Less than 20% of leaders were able to communicate the why of their company. So if we're going to start trying to win as companies, really understanding what is our purpose is huge. I'll tell you a funny story because I also think it's so important that we as individuals try and figure out our purpose. Last November, there was a Saturday evening. I'd come back, I'd been traveling all week, and my wife said to me, we've got to go for dinner tonight. And I didn't know anybody at that dinner, so I said, I'm not going. I'm staying at home. You go. She said, you're coming. I said, I am not coming to dinner. I actually want to watch the Notre Dame Clemson game. I have no desire to go and meet a whole bunch of people who I don't know. You are coming. Well, I'll come, but I'm going to misbehave. Now, I'm very lucky. I have a wife who, for whatever reason, adores me. I adore her. And she puts up to me. So she said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm not going to tell you. So, you know when you arrive at a party and you start meeting somebody and you just get it, after about 10 minutes, you get to that time when you type and say, so what do you do? So at that moment, I looked at this person. I said, so what's your purpose in life? I said, why do you exist? I had a bruise from where my wife kicked me for about 3 weeks. But I said to him, listen, I'm taking the mickey. Of course I am a tiny bit. But I actually am really interested in understanding what is your purpose? And for 45 minutes, we just thrashed around what was his purpose in life. And he became a really interesting person. And then I said to him, so what do you do? He said, oh, I'm an area VP for Siemens. I said, how boring. I think it's incredibly important for every single one of us to actually try and figure out what is our why, because most of us are living our lives through our what. When people ask you, what do? You tell them actually what you do. You don't tell them why you do it. And one thing I can promise you is people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And if you're able to start thinking about life through why I do things as opposed to what I do, I think we're going to live richer lives. I created a business strategy at Hyatt around the word empathy. Empathy towards our colleagues and empathy towards our customers. And empathy is a very interesting word because it's quite tied to sympathy. But if you listen to somebody and just sympathize with them, you're going to get nowhere. And if you empathize with somebody and do nothing, you're going to end up with apathy. So one of the things which I passionately believe in, first of all, I believe we're all quite good listeners. There are very, very few of us who are good at empathy, of truly, truly looking at each other as individuals with very unique needs. If you actually do become more empathetic, you then have to take action. Empathy with action equals care. And if, as I believe tomorrow, we have to become a more compassionate world, and that's where every single one of us wants to be, then we're going to have to practice our skills of empathy. But empathy in action is care. And care can only take place when you're fully present. And when you're listening closely. And when you're watching carefully. If you're not, you're in big trouble. You'll actually come across as unauthentic. Do you know, this afternoon, 47% of the time I have been talking, your mind has wandered. Proven data. I'm doing some very interesting work with a neuroscientist out of the University of Wisconsin called Richard Davidson. And if you've got a pen, write down his name and Google him tonight. Richard Davidson, University of Wisconsin. He is doing some really groundbreaking scientific studies. And he was challenged in 1992 by the Dalai Lama, who said to him, all of you brilliant neuroscientists are spending all of your time focusing on fear and anxiety. None of you are focusing on what creates compassion and kindness in the brain. And he spent a lifetime in trying to do it. How many of you got kids in the room? How many times do those kids of yours say, Mom, Dad, you're not listening? I promise you, if they are telling you, you're also not listening at work. Your kids are the greatest barometer of your own abilities because they have a straight filter. And they tell you what you're doing. And I know that as I've been going on my own personal journey, I am a far better listener to my son today than I was 3 years ago. I have a very different relationship with him than I did. How many of you last week, because today's Monday or Tuesday? Today's Tuesday. How many of you last week were on email and on the telephone at the same time? Come on, you all were. Guess what? You are not doing justice to either. You're not doing justice to the person who's on the telephone, and you're not doing justice to the person you're replying on an email. I actually believe multitasking is creating inefficiency. I now live my life where I allocate periods of my day where I will just do email. I'm more efficient. I don't live and die by my iPhone and iPad to reply instantly. And I have other periods of my time when I'm actually communicating. And I think that as we go forward, we have to go back. Some of us are old enough to remember the days of faxes. Anybody didn't know what a fax is? But in the old days, we'd arrive in the office, we'd have a whole bunch of faxes, we'd sit down with our assistant, we'd dictate our replies, our assistant would spend the day typing them out, we could get on and communicate with everybody. Then at 4:30 in the afternoon, we go back to our office and sign all the pieces of paper that she'd dictated. We've lost that. Think about how we used to live our lives and the way we do today. And lastly, how many of you have walked out of your boss's office recently and felt you weren't listened to? Thank you. Now, all I'm going to say to you is, please make sure the next time somebody walks into your office, you figure out, gosh, I better really listen to them. Because the way you feel when your boss tells you that when you feel he hasn't listened is the way those who work for you feel as well. I want to do a quick listening exercise. Are you ready? Can you all please pair up? I want two. Pair up and stand up. All of you stand up. Find a pair. Two of you. Find a pair. Quick, quick. All right. Have you all got pairs? If there's an odd one, I've got an odd one here. Anybody else odd? There we go. Match up. Anybody else by themselves? I've got one more down here who's by herself. Anybody else who's by themselves? Nick, you can't join in. It doesn't work like that. Is there somebody else who's by themselves? Yeah, there's a lady over there. Could you just walk over there? Okay, I want you, partner A, put your hand up. Partner B, put your hand up. So here's what we're going to do. Partner A, please tell partner B for 45 seconds what you did on your last vacation. For 45 seconds. As soon as we finish, we're going to switch, and I want partner B to tell partner A what they did on their vacation. Got it? So we're both going to tell each other for 45 seconds what we did on our vacation. Partner A, go.
Okay.
How much longer?
Oh, you're like overtime now. When you play the game.
Stop! Stop! Okay, partner B, I'm switching the rules on you. For the next 20 seconds, I want you to tell partner A what partner A told you about their vacation. Go. Okay, stop. Stop, stop, stop. Now I want to ask all partner Bs, how many of you were thinking about what you were going to say when partner A was talking? That is what happens in your daily life at work. Let's take our seats. Okay, guys, can I just tell you, my favorite part of this morning was when Bennu said, take away that time zone. I'm not going to follow it because guess what? She set the example for us all. So I'm just going to be about 5 minutes more, but Bennu, it's your fault. If you had been on time, I'd have been on time. And I checked with Anil. He said I could take as long as I like because he told me he told you to be on time and you said I can't. Okay, how do we take purpose with you? I just want to ask you all, do we truly listen to our customers, whoever that customer might be? Do we truly listen to our colleagues? And are we really challenging the status quo? For all of you who are e-commerce, working in hotels, when was the last time you checked a customer in? How can you truly think about that customer experience if you're not actually seeing what they go through? Have any of you spent a day with a housekeeper, with a room maid, and made beds for 8 hours? It's the most brilliant experience, and if you haven't, do it. Because you'll learn more about the way a consumer is using the room. You'll also find out how every single of our roommates in whichever hotel in the world all have incredible stories. But think about it, we, in the roles that we play, tend to stay in our offices. People look at us as those geeks. Imagine if we actually became more human, spent more time in an operation, spent more time talking to our colleagues who actually deliver the experiences. And I'm going to ask you, when was the last time any of you spoke to a customer who stays in a hotel? Because we're designing experiences for those customers, and if we don't ask them about those experiences, we won't truly be able to put our design according to their needs. So I really believe that if you can, spend more time talking to customers. I'm amazed, when I was a kid, we didn't have all of the memos we now get from Chicago. We didn't have revenue managers. We didn't have e-commerce managers. We just looked after customers. And that's an art that has been forgotten. I've done a lot of work with a company called Barry Waymiller, an incredible company, very purpose-driven. Their CEO is Bob Chapman. He has some views which I actually believe in. Every one of us in this room wants to do better. Everybody who works for us wants to do better. Trust them. Leaders are throughout our organization. Find them. People achieve things big and small, celebrate them, and some wish things to be different. Listen to them. Everybody matters. Show them. And he measures success by the way we touch people's lives. I said earlier, I actually was very fortunate recently. I spent 3 days with His Holiness, with a group of people, and we were sharing with him views of how we wanted to try and change the workforce and make the workforce more compassionate. We were asking him for his feedback on how we could do it. And what I would say to you is that Eastern culture and Western science is merging. In the Dalai's lifetime, I promise you, the beliefs that he has in creating a more compassionate world are already and will be publicly known as being scientifically proven to help us. I'm doing some work at the moment, and we put together a consortium of Hyatt, PwC, Steelcase, IDEO, National Geographic. We believe, based on Richard Davidson and the Dalai, that within 3 to 4 years, when you fill out your healthcare form, you know how it says, do you smoke or not? There will be another line which says, do you meditate or not? And there are metrics that are going to be in play very shortly, which you will be able to show a healthcare provider that you are truly meditating and doing the work and doing it properly. And in 4 to 5 years, it will be proven that meditation actually will reduce healthcare costs. And it will become part and parcel of our daily lives for every single one of us. It's going to happen, it's coming, and to be honest with you, the biggest challenge we have is words. You will never hear me use the word mindfulness. What actually the Dalai believes, and what Richard Davidson is proving, is that we all have different levels of resilience. We all take bad news at different times and different ways. Some of us take it well, some of us don't. We all have different levels of outlook. When we hear good news, we stay high or low. We all have different levels of focus, and we all have different levels of generosity. And each and every one of those we can improve. As the Dalai says, when you talk, you're only repeating what you already know. When you listen, you may learn something new. And what I learned from him the other day was the power of being present allows you to actually be more empathetic. And if you're truly empathetic, it takes you on a course of becoming more compassionate. True empathy is the result of a compassionate heart with no expectation of a reward. As we go through this, change will actually be up to us as individuals. We can change if we want, and we can stay as we like if we want to. But I think we're going to find that more and more of us will be taking down a slightly different route as we go forward. So if there are 4 things just to take away from you for this meeting, we're in a world of constant change. I actually feel that higher purpose is a business strategy that most companies will start taking, that we have to relearn the power of empathy, and that every single one of us has a story about our lives. Learn someone's story today. I want to finish by telling you my own personal why. And my personal why is to inspire others to join a journey of love so that they too can live a richer life. And if this afternoon I persuaded one of you to come on that journey, that's good enough for me. Thank you very much.